very much, Yoko. I hope people online hear me clearly. Thanks, just to say, it's absolutely fantastic to be here. And we've had a day of great conversations between ourselves and colleagues within ADB. And basically, I just want to start by saying thank you. This is clearly a partnership based on trust, and we're doing some really good things together. And I want to talk to you a little bit about those today. Next slide, please. So what I thought I'd do is I'd introduce you to BirdLife. Those of you who don't know us, I'll say a little bit about BirdLife in numbers. I'll also then introduce the Regional Flyway Initiative so that we get more and building on the introduction you just had. I'll give my perspective of our value to you as a development bank. And then I'll also end by saying how I think you as ADB help us and hopefully demonstrating the fact there's a really interesting synergy which we can build upon. Next slide, please. So for those of you who don't know BirdLife, we are 102 years old. We were founded on the back of the successful campaign to outlaw the use of bird feathers and wild birds in the hat trade. And organisations came together to say, we are more likely to achieve more by acting together than acting separately. And that mantra we continue to this day. We are about collaboration at scale around the world to have great. Next slide. Next slide. And so, yeah, this slide describes who we are. So we're different from other NGOs. We are a civil society partnership now made up of 123 partners in 119 countries around the world. So those of you on screen, you might see a little red circle around our partner in the Philippines. And it's fantastic to have two representatives of Harper here today. And around the world, we have something like 10 million supporters and also more than 7,000 staff. So we are the largest civil society partnership, and it's our job, the Secretariat, which I lead, to try and help that partnership have as much impact as possible. Next slide, please. And that's a map of the footprint of our partnership. There are some big white areas on the map, which is where we do not have partners. And if you look in, you can just about see 11 red dots. Now, these are the 11 offices of the BirdLife Secretariat offices. And as a secretariat, we are 250 people from 58 nationalities. And our job is to support the partners, to support Harper, to support all of the other 122 partners around the world. Next slide, please. So why do we exist? Well, we exist because nature is in crisis. And every document that's been produced over the last few years has reinforced the nature of the biodiversity crisis. So whether it's the IPBES report, the Global Biodiversity Outlook, the latest Regulus report, or indeed our own State of the World's Birds publication, each of them are saying the same thing. Nature is in crisis and we need to act now. So we exist to try and reverse the declines of nature, to try and prevent common threatened species becoming extinct, and to make sure that common species remain common so that we can all continue to benefit from a healthy natural environment. Next slide, please. Of the flyway across East Asia and Australasia. And this is the most threatened flyway on the planet. We're focusing on waterbirds, and there are about 50 million waterbirds that move through this flyway of about 200 species. And the sites where they go are also home to about 200 million people. And what the RFIs over 50 sites in about 11 countries. And in addition to that, actually that figure is wrong, we'll hopefully protect more than 2 million hectares, delivering all the benefits in terms of biodiversity, climate, and indeed for people. Next slide, please. And there are two really key elements to this. One is around developing an investment pipeline of sites, which this finance can actually support. And then the second thing is a complementary granting mechanism for civil society organisations, so that essentially the funding that the ADB mobilises will help governments and public institutions, while at the same time the granting mechanism hopefully will benefit civil society organisations. And the next slide demonstrates how this all might fit together at a site level. So obviously, national and subnational governments hopefully will benefit from the financing mobilised by the ADB, maybe loans, concessional financing, or potentially the Global Environment Facility, money that they have allocated, and then grant funding coming up through the local civil society organisations, Indigenous peoples and local communities. And they will basically do different things in a site. Some of the hard infrastructure will be delivered by governments, whereas the biodiversity monitoring, community engagement, awareness raising more likely to be done by civil society organisations. Next slide, please. And this is helping you meet your commitments. So you have a really ambitious strategy going out to 2030, and you have a very clear operational priority 3, which is around delivering all of your action in a way which is in harmony with the environment. And of course, you also have made big commitments, for example, the multilateral bank commitments and COP26 about mainstreaming nature in all of your activities. And of course, everyone is trying to align behind the commitments of the CBD, of the UNFCCC, and of course, SDGs. So essentially, this approach, because it's delivering on the triple wins of nature, climate, and people, is helping you deliver on many of your own commitments. Next slide, please. So what is the value you get from working with our partnership? Next slide, please. I've got 5 thoughts on this. So what do we offer? So the first thing that we can offer is really big picture vision and strategy. So we think in the way of, we think about what birds need wherever they go. And so we generally think at scale, big flyway scale. And of course, we are looking, because birds know no borders, we are looking for transnational conservation effort. And so we can help identify where are the most crucial sites that birds need, all part of their life cycle. And then what we can try and do is to develop a set of projects which are hopefully investable, that can provide a framework for genuine sustainable development. So that's the first thing. The second thing, next slide, is that we are the world global authority on birds. We maintain some of the most important data sets on birds, whether it's the World Database of Birds, or indeed the Important Bird Areas database, or the Key Biodiversity Areas database. And so what we can do is we can use our science and technical support to identify key priorities for investment. And what this slide is showing you is actually the sites that we have identified through the RFI, which are of particular importance for migratory birds. And each of the countries illustrated, there are a number of sites that we've identified, and we're working with those governments to try and then encourage them to seek investment from ADB. And of course, our ambition is to try and ensure that not only do ADB investments not cause harm, we also want them to be doing good in terms of restoring some of these sites. Next slide. And we also offer some innovative solutions, which we think can help guide investment decisions. So I think you've heard previously about Avistep. This is essentially our sensitivity mapping tool, which was piloted thanks to ADB investment in 4 countries, including India, you can see here. And we basically create traffic light maps which help governments and renewable industry work out how do you deploy energy without causing harm to nature, because obviously some of the infrastructure can be really problematic if it's put in the wrong place from a biodiversity point of view, particularly birds. And the second tool, which you guys are subscribers to, is IBAT, the Integrated Biodiversity Assessment Tool. And that can really help you understand the footprint of your supply chain or where you invest. And it's increasingly being used by many businesses around the world to help them to understand and then disclose their impacts on nature. And we hope it then drives action, positive action as well. Next slide, please. And the fourth thing that we offer, which you can imagine, given the fact I showed you the slide earlier of 123 partners in 119 countries, and it was great to hear your colleagues speak earlier about your commitment to civil society. So we have this civil society network available, and they have local insights. They have the knowledge and expertise which can help influence national decision makers, and they can also help ensure that the investments that you make are actually validated in terms of delivering the biodiversity that you want. So they're trusted by local communities, they have the expertise, and because they are in many countries, and they can be the eyes and ears of the ground, and you get that through working with BirdLife. Next slide, please. And finally, we exist to try and build the capacity of our partners to have greater impact. And we have huge experience of doing this. And I just used an example of what we do with the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. We've had many experiences whereby we've mobilized a lot of money in any of the 35 biodiversity hotspots around the world, specifically to support civil society have greater impact, positive impact for nature. And we have this slide is just some of the stats relating to the Mediterranean Basin Biodiversity Hotspot, which is where we've been working for the last 10 years or so. So we know how to do this. And so when we talk about the granting mechanism to complement the 3 billion that you're going to mobilize, this is all about trying to engage and support civil society to be more active around some of these sites. Next slide, please. And so really just to close, how do you help us? So this is very much a two-way street. And the next slide demonstrates that we were talking about this over lunch. So you've heard that this partnership has been in existence for 7 years. And I think pretty much from day one, I heard just now from one of your colleagues, Mark, that actually every conversation we've had has been done with mutual respect and a real sense of co-creation. So every step of the way, we have been working in a trusted partnership, these three organizations, to develop this Regional Flyway Initiative. And I think because we have this trust, I'm hoping we can achieve some amazing things in the future as well. Next slide, please. And you're also showing global leadership. So whether it's through your Nature Solutions Finance Hub or your participation in the Energy Task Force, which is governed under the Convention on Migratory Species, or indeed with the RFI itself, you are demonstrating to the world how things should be done. And you should be out and loud and proud about it. Because the next slide demonstrates that, next slide. So these are the 4 great flyways of the world. And of course, the East Asia-Australasian Flyway one, we put right in the center in that sort of orange color. And the great thing is that thanks to the work that we've done with you with this RFI, we have catalyzed other development banks to do the same. So for example, with the Development Bank for Latin America and the Caribbean, we have our new America's Flyways Initiative. With our partners, our US partner, the Audubon Society, and we're also actively in conversations with other development banks about the other 2 flyways, the Africa-Eurasian Flyway and also the Central Asian Flyway. So I always think with conservation that you can't save the world on your own, but if you can lift up and point to success and then inspire others to do more, then that's when you're having real impact. And this is what the ADB-led RFI is doing. It is snowballing migratory bird conservation around the world. And for that, we are extremely grateful. And I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Martin, for that inspiring talk. And of course, the Regional Flyway Initiative is one of the most key programs that we have in environment team. And the fact that it's a regional initiative and it's a partnership with a CSO, and it really is, as you say, developed under the mutual trust and mutual cooperation. And I think that is really the power of bringing in all partners together and bringing in that strength of each organization, as you well illustrated here. Okay, so I know that the time is kind of pushing, so we're gonna move forward with the panel discussion. I want to now invite Sylvia and Babette and Beatrice on the panel. And I know Sylvia is on screen, so we'll have her in the screen, but we're with you. And thank you so much for joining. And also Martin, please do join as well. Okay. Great. Okay. Is it working? Perfect. So we'll first move with Sylvia. Hi, how are you? Sylvia Cardassia. She's from the AFNR, the Agriculture, Food and Nature and Rural Development Sector Group. And she is a team lead for the South Daunting Lake project. She is leading one of the ADB's first investment program on Regional Flyway. We are really excited about it. And we want to get your perspective on the project. And I'll first hand it over to Sylvia to explain about what the Daunting Lake project is all about and how it's moving forward and how it can be a good illustration of how we can work on the Regional Flyway Initiative and together with civil society. So over to you.
Thank you, Yoko, and hi everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. So thanks everyone, and it's really interesting and exciting for me to be here and explain you a little bit more about the South Daunting Lake project. So as a general geographic background on the project, we are in Daunting Lake, which is situated in the middle reaches of the Yangtze River, which is one of the most important rivers in the PRC in China. And we are in the Hunan province, which is in the south of the PRC. Daunting is also the second largest freshwater lake in the PRC, and it's really essential for many ecosystem services, including climate regulation, biodiversity, habitat, and also freshwater. The lake is also recognized as one of the 200 global ecoregions for biodiversity, and it supports critical habitats for migratory waterbirds in the East Asian-Australasian Flyway that we have just learned from Martin's presentation. This is in fact identified as one of the highest priority sites of the RFI, and the lake comprises 4 different nature reserves. The project specifically, the investment focuses on South Daunting Lake, which is also designated as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar site. So as said, this is the first RFI investment, and it will serve as a demonstration project to also scale up future wetland projects, both in the PRC and also in other regions in our DMCs. It will be a flagship project also to contribute to the MDB nature statement to scale up nature positive investment. And what's interesting about this project, it's really that it takes a landscape approach to support the government in operationalizing wetlands and migratory bird conservation, also to enhance resilience of wetland ecosystems on the one hand, but on the other hand, also it supports diversified and resilient livelihoods in Daunting Lake. So this happens, this is a loan of about 300 million, of which ADB contributes 150 million. So it's quite a large investment that comprises both a component on biodiversity and restoration of degraded wetlands, specific sites of the nature reserve within South Daunting Lake, but it also includes a sustainable development component with the setup of an eco-compensation incentive mechanism that will promote sustainable farming and aquaculture, and also ecotourism development around the wetland and also outside in the urban area surrounding it. So this project is quite important because it will adopt nature-based solutions and also introduce for the first time gross ecosystem product accounting to really quantify ecosystem services economic benefits and inform eco-compensations, and also to measure the performance of the project and also how the site will be doing during project implementation. So this is a project, the project will be approved in October, so we are still, sort of at the end of the preparation stage, and it will be implemented for 6 years, so starting from 2025 onward. In terms of leveraging partnerships and collaborations, we have had a lot of, well, first of all, our partners, our main financing partners are the French Development Agency, but we have also collaborated with many development, with many civil society organizations. Of course, this include partnerships with BirdLife International, who is a key and active partner to deliver on the Regional Flyway Initiative, as we learned from the presentation, Martin's presentation. Also, another thing I wanted to highlight is that during project preparation, we've had several rounds of consultations with different CSOs, both international CSOs, part of which are also part of the network of BirdLife International, and also CSOs really on the ground. This is both in the context of meaningful civil society engagement for the environmental and social safeguard assessment, which is one of the most important due diligence aspects, if not the most important aspect of ADB projects, especially those investing in nature. We've also had dedicated consultations with WWF in the field. WWF, in fact, has a strong presence in the PRC, and it is particularly renowned also for the wetland education programs. So we discussed with them opportunities to also engage them during project implementation as part of capacity building activities. So let me pause here for now.
Great. Thank you so much, Sylvia. That's really exciting. And it's really showcase how you're really working on an integrated sort of program at the landscape level and really demonstrating how conservation as well as economic development as well as livelihood issue can be addressed all together. We're really excited. In the initial stage, we were thinking about we're going to Martin and you'd respond, but considering the time pressure, let me just go through the panelists and then maybe Martin, you can sort of be a response afterwards, if you don't mind. I think that would kind of save a little bit of time, and also we can hear from the panelists more in depth. Okay, great. So with that, the second speaker is actually our good friend, Miss Bebet Gosen. She's the former secretary of the environment here in Philippines, and she's currently the chair of the compliance review panel. And she'll give us some more thoughts about the important role the civil society can play with ADB and how she sees the role of civil society in the compliance review panel and how we can sort of tap into their expertise and move forward. So the floor is yours, Bebet.
Thank you, Yoko. Completely agree with Martin and others that the civil society organizations play a very important role in the development agenda. I think the key role that civil society plays was first recognized globally during the Earth Summit in 1992. I feel so old here, having been there, where it was identified that the key stakeholders to really achieve sustainable development are government, the private sector, and civil society. When I was in government, we made sure that civil society was actually part of the planning, policy making, and the different management bodies that we created, like the air quality management boards, protected area management boards, solid waste management boards. Not just that they are consulted, but they're part of that entire process, from assessment to planning, actual decision making, implementation, all the way to monitoring and evaluation. In fact, when I was secretary, for a debt for nature swap that I negotiated with the US for the tropical forest conservation and management, we made sure that the governing board was actually composed of only 2 representatives from government, finance, and the Department of Environment, 2 from private sector, and 5 from civil society. Why did we push for that? Because we believe that civil society has very critical, multiple roles to play in pushing the development agenda. They are an important source of information for citizens and government. That's to citizens and government and from citizens and government as well. They being closer to the ground, they give us very important insights and perspectives on how things can work, what can actually be effective. In a sense, provide us the needed reality check, which we may not necessarily have on our own. They provide a voice to the affected communities, especially the most vulnerable, and more importantly, the environment, who has no voice at all, especially on issues of biodiversity. Given their experience and expertise, they have a lot of knowledge, which can provide very valuable insights and inputs to their other different partners, be it government, the private sector, or institutions such as ADB. They are engaged in advocacies for very important and sometimes very challenging and controversial issues. For example, when we wanted to declare an area here in the Philippines involving 3 provinces and declare it a natural park, but that area was very rich in mineral resources, so you can understand, and also forest resources. So there was a lot of logging and mining there before. It was really tapping the support and pushing them, working with the civil society groups to raise awareness and understanding of why we needed to protect this area, which has the biggest lowland forest in the whole country, despite the fact that, basically give up mining in these particular areas and declare it a natural park would be more beneficial to the country. Last but not the least, they act as watchdogs. They monitor how government implements its policies and programs, including institutions such as ADB, which comes now to my role here in ADB, because we are implementing one of the functions of the accountability mechanism of the bank. The accountability mechanism was set up precisely because, like World Bank, people cannot sue ADB should there be any unintended adverse impacts on them or their environment. So having the accountability mechanism then gives people a forum where they can raise their issues and have them addressed. Specifically, in relation to biodiversity and birds, 2 years ago, we received a complaint from civil society representatives in Nepal for a road project which was being done, which adversely affected the vultures, which is a critically endangered species. And it was, they were very active in the BirdLife Society in their area and also in the entire country. And they were clearly saying that we're not against the project. All we want is that you consider, including in the assessment, the impact of this project on the birds, which was not at all there in the environmental impact assessment. And the specific thing they wanted to do in one corridor of that road was they requested the local government to wait for 3 months before cutting the trees where the road was to be expanded, because there was a vulture chick nesting on that tree, and just to wait for 3 months until the chick flies away. Unfortunately, they approached the wrong institution. They talked to the local government when it was a national body, the roads department, which had a say in that particular project. And unfortunately, the local government did not relay that information to the one who could have made that decision. So the tree was cut, the nest fell, the vulture chick was there on the road dying and eventually died. And that became a major news. That's how our staff here in HQ found out about it. Too late, unfortunately. And so, of course, remedies, they raised that issue with us. And while we found it ineligible because our policies require that they should have made prior good faith efforts to try to resolve it at the operations level first, it was a very valid concern. And so our project team engaged with them, and subsequently a bird impact assessment was actually done, and the appropriate mitigations were subsequently then put in place. Just last week, I also received a concern from another civil society group, this time raising the issue of the possible adverse impact on pelicans in a project in a regional floodwaters project in India. So again, since it wasn't really a complaint, but they were just raising their concern about the possible adverse impact on the pelicans, we asked them to raise it with the project team directly so something could be done. So clearly, they are an important voice for issues like this in the environment, because when it's let's say an issue of air pollution or dust, issue of noise or solid waste, which directly affects people, you can expect affected communities to raise it with us. But when you're talking of birds, you're talking, for example, of the elephants in another case that we received, the voice for those issues are more often than not the civil society groups, and we need them to raise those issues so that we make sure that any ADB assisted project does not adversely affect them, which is actually the objective of ADB in the first place.
Well, thank you very much, Bebet, for really emphasizing the need of having those accountability mechanism and also really hearing the voices of civil society and voices of the nature, actually, in that way. Yes, and I really think that what we're really trying to do to have those, not the adverse impact to nature, and also do good to the nature, like what Sylvia was emphasizing. And also we have similar projects that are coming up in Fushan Lake and many other places. We have a sort of robust portfolio of about 1.5 billion coming along with Regional Flyway. And I really think that learning from lessons from civil society voices, incorporating those in these upcoming projects are very, very important. So with that, let me pass it on to Ms. Beatriz Gomez. She's a Principal Environment Officer in our Safeguard team. And she's been working on particularly energy sector and many other sectors looking into birds as well as biodiversity and many other elements. So I want to ask you as well how you've been working with civil society in these endeavors, and also how we make sure that the safeguard initiatives are squarely incorporated in our initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you, Yoko. Yeah, so I guess from Heidi's message and Babette's message, I think it's quite obvious that ADB values meaningful consultation with CSOs. On the project level, there's many ways that CSOs can engage with ADB. First off, we provide funding, sometimes through financial intermediaries. Secondly, CSOs are key project stakeholders, and they engage with projects through project consultation, that process. CSOs also give us feedback on how well projects are running, and that they do through project level grievance mechanisms as well. And then there's also direct engagement with CSOs. So when there's a concern, sometimes they come directly to ADB, and we find out about unanticipated concerns, like the vultures in that case. And then for more complex projects, ADB sometimes facilitates through the clients engagement with CSOs, usually to provide expert advice during the due diligence process. And finally, CSOs can also be our implementation partners. So through, sometimes we have CSOs who actually implement biodiversity offset programs for the projects. They also support sometimes livelihood restoration programs. And as I think somebody mentioned earlier, they are also sometimes doing participatory monitoring for our programs. So there's a lot of different ways CSOs engage with us, and we engage with them. For BirdLife and ADB, so we've been working at project level and obviously at the strategic level as well. For the project level, we've actually done a lot of projects where there are potential significant adverse impacts on birds. So we work with the clients to engage. We actually tell them they're required to engage with BirdLife or the BirdLife partners, and they're involved in the environmental assessment at that stage. We've worked a lot on Uzbekistan energy projects, large-scale renewable projects, renewable energy projects, and we have one project in particular where we had a 500 megawatt wind power plant quite near to a ecologically sensitive area. So we actually were involved. We had our own experts. We had BirdLife experts involved in that assessment. And that pushed us to actually, for the client, to adopt first of its kind technology to shut down turbines when birds are at risk of collision. So actually the turbines are actually connected by a neural network, and it learns the bird behavior, the target species, and then it adjusts the turbine's operations based on the risk to the birds. So that's being deployed at the moment, and it's under trial. It's first of its kind in Asia, and first time that an MDB has funded that. Of course, we funded that with IFC and EBRD. Then we have Avistep, and that is a useful tool. Our clients can use that to plan their pipeline and hopefully appropriately locate their projects. So that's a really useful tool. But also that tool and the data that BirdLife has put together for that tool is now currently being used in the strategic environmental assessment for the whole of Uzbekistan, which we hope to get buy-in with the government. And that's a push also between ourselves, ADB, IFC, and EBRD. So that's just examples of how we engage with BirdLife and other CSOs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Beatrice. Great example of how we're engaging with BirdLife and other NGOs and in bringing in that innovation to how we can address those issues like the innovative turbine sort of mechanism. So that was great. So reflecting on what Sylvia and Babette and Beatrice has mentioned, and I'm so happy to have this very gender balanced panel today. Martin, you have the honor of reflecting on this and sort of reflecting on the how civil society and BirdLife have been engaged from project development to safeguard to accountability, and then having these AviStep and other tools. So the microphone is yours.
Okay, thanks, Yoko. I thought that was a great collection of stories, actually. And I'll just pull out a few themes. So I think that the first thing I'd say is that, you know, what civil society and the science community can do is really help target effort to try and ensure we get the biggest bang for our finite conservation buck. And so the sites that obviously Sylvia's talking about is chosen because of its importance, and therefore you invest. And also the other thing about science, it helps you save time, because particularly if there are risks and there are problems, if you identify the real reason for threat or reason for decline, then you can target it. I think the second reflection I would make, this, you know, particularly at a site level, this really is the importance of thinking sort of in the margins of the site, the wider land use context, which Sylvia mentioned, which I think is so often seen as a secondary issue, that you deal with what's happening on site first and you think about the wider land use second. The fact that that's being dealt with upfront, I think, is really, really important. I think the second thing, the third theme I would raise really is the role of civil society as critical friend. Now, you know, you will have your own experience of working with NGOs. We can be quite annoying and quite loud and rowdy at times. The reality is that if, for example, we're dealing with a problem which is got to a point where there's a development in the wrong place, arguably that's a failure of policy. We don't want to be dealing with end-of-pipe problems. Arguably, we want to be engaging upstream to try and influence the policy and regulatory environment, which then governs the nature of those developments. So, you know, I know the fact that you guys in ADB have been engaging with us over things like your safeguarding policy is really, really helpful, so that we can give you our perspectives about how you can make, you know, it as robust as possible to make sure that you're following the mitigation hierarchy or whatever it might be. And so I think that, you know, do see us as a critical friend. I know you do as ADB, but also if it actually, a sign of it going wrong is when we get a bit rowdy and we start causing you problems, because that's suggesting a failure of policy. And I think the sort of the third theme, perhaps I would say, around sort of the AviStep is that learning from what's working and then really embedding it. And I think sometimes there's a risk you get a really nice tool like AviStep, that it looks glossy, it's got these nice red, amber, green lights, and it's a nice map, so it looks great, but it's then got to be embedded in, you know, the strategic planning system of the country. You mentioned Uzbekistan, it's great to hear. And then, of course, how do we raise awareness of it amongst the renewable energy community so that they're using it as well? So really trying to make sure we have that follow through in terms of embedding it in the planning system and also raising awareness. And my final reflection for everyone really is to remain ambitious. So I think that your 2030 strategy is really clear, it's really ambitious, but we're having a conversation earlier today to try and make sure that when you're setting out an ambition to be a nature positive bank, how you make sure you then operationalize that in every part of the great machine that is ADB. Because, you know, we don't have an enormous amount of time to deal with the nature and climate emergency. You here in Manila are clearly on the front line of, you know, more intense weather patterns. And all of us has to think about how we play our part. So please remain ambitious, and just to repeat what I said right at the beginning, BirdLife is just very proud to partner with you on this incredible ambition for the East Asian-Australasian Flyway. We want to take it global, and I think together we can do that.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin. And that encouraging word that we really continue to be ambitious. And as you know, we're the Climate Bank of Asia and Pacific, and we have this ambition of 100 billion. And we really think that in order to achieve that, the nature solutions and the nature positive investment is a really key to achieve that. And we have this environmental action plan that is being developed right now to really enable the implementation and also enable the One ADB team to come together with partner like yours and others to really implement the ambition that we have. So with that few words, we want to allocate the time for Q&A. Maybe we can start from the online participants. If there is any questions, comments, do we see anything on the chat box? Nope. Meanwhile, if there's anybody in the audience here who have any questions, comments from the distinguished panelists, great. Please inform your name and where you belong. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, all the panelists. Very insightful discussion. My name is Woochong, and I am an intern here at ADB. I'm working on climate adaptation and conservation finance. So actually, this is very relevant to my assignment. And I have two questions. The first one is, when we have safeguard at the beginning of the project planning, but we know climate change now is also affecting the biodiversity a lot. So it may cause phenomenon such as a range shift. So if after the construction of like wind turbines and the routine of the birds change, is there any dynamic follow-up monitor management system to to cater to the dynamic? And the second question is, all this monitor and also data is very valuable for business case. And how can we make this data and the result of a civil society organization not only to point project, but also be a open information that can be shared with more commercial, like business, private sector? Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for the question. Maybe Martin and Beatrice maybe can also follow some of the practice that we have.
Yes, I mean, Beatrice is knee deep in this, but I mean, I would say three things in terms of from the renewables point of view. So location is king for renewable energy projects. Put it in places which are not daft for existing populations. The second thing is you can have environmental management systems built into any wind farm operation. So you can have this concept of shutdown on demand, which I've seen, for example, in Egypt, you get a combination of radar and then on the ground observers to see migratory birds coming in, and then you could basically tell the wind farm operator to shut it down. So you can have environmental management systems built in. But I think the other thing about generally, how do you help species adapt to climate change? Obviously, we know that those ranges are shifting polewards, whatever kilometers a year that they're moving, and we know that they're only going to be able to flourish if they've got available habitat. So there is definitely a protect and restore habitat which is suitable for different species, and so that is essentially consistent with the ambitions in the global biodiversity framework, the restoration agenda, the 30 by 30 site protection agenda, and that will sort of help. And then briefly on the private sector side, that's what IBAT's all about really, is trying to sort of bring to life and in a way which is useful for businesses the most incredible data sets that we have. I should have said IBAT is a partnership with IUCN, with UNFWC, and also with Conservation International, as well as BirdLife. And what we do is we help businesses interpret our data to help them to try and ensure they have no harm, cause no harm through their supply chain, and at the same time try and do good. But I would love to hear Beatrice's response to the first question.
No, that's very good. And just to add on to your bit, so when you implement the project, you obviously always have management programs to, I guess, verify what you expect or catch what you don't expect, or so you'll have the management plans, you'll have shutdown on demand for if it's wind turbines, for example, shutdown on demand that's verified on the ground as well as technology driven, which is what we're doing now in a lot of our projects. But importantly, you have monitoring systems that then are robust and quantitative and repeatable. So you can have a baseline data to then base future mitigation measures that have to be put in place to adapt to the changing conditions. So adaptive management is quite a big condition that we now put in a lot of our projects.
Perfect. Thank you. And is Karen a question?
There's one online.
Yes.
So I'm going to read the question from JCI Cebu, Jobel Labang. So the question is, hello, we are Junior Chamber International, Cebu, and since 1948, we have been actively involved in environmental and community projects here in Cebu. Given our long-standing commitment to sustainable development and community well-being, we are eager to collaborate with organizations such as ADB and NGOs like BirdLife International. How can we effectively integrate our local expertise and initiatives with your programs to advance environmental protection and achieve SDG targets in our region?
Great. So the question is about how ADB can further integrate and work together with a national NGO like from the Cebu. And thank you so much for participating from Cebu for this session, and also how BirdLife will be working more with national organization. I think you mentioned that in one of your slides as well. So maybe start with Martin, and if there's anybody from the NGO center, maybe we can ask somebody to respond to that. Thank you.
Yes, was the organization Philippine-based? Yes. So, I mean, I don't know. So the first thing I would say is obviously, our national partner is Harper, and therefore I'm hoping, I'm sure that there's a good network of collaboration between Harper and many other NGOs across the archipelago. I think the other specific thing I would say regarding the RFI is that, our ambition, as I said in my presentation, is that we will create a granting mechanism for civil society to support them in achieving our ambitions for site safeguard across the whole of the flyway. So I showed a couple of logos on the screen, but I didn't mention them. But we are working with the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund and having dialogue with the Global Environment Facility to try and capitalize this fund. And it's going to take us a bit of while, but if we are able to capitalize this fund, then of course our role will be help to administer those funds to civil society to achieve the site protection ambitions that we have. So watch this space, but that's definitely part of the plan.
Great. Thank you, Martin. Is there anyone from NGO Center who wants to talk about a response to national NGOs participation?
Hello, Yoko. I'm Rosel from the NGO and Civil Society Center from Heidi's team. And yeah, if there's ADB presence she's from Cebu, right? If there's ADB presence in Cebu, environmental or any type of projects, we definitely involve them in consultations, and even in country partnership strategy. The team is talking about not only at the project level but at policy level. We definitely would like to hear views from national and local civil society organizations as well. For example, for PHCO, our Philippine Country Office, did regional consultations, including with CSOs, for its priority and strategies for the Philippines. So yes, we listen to feedback from local and national NGOs. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe Karen, you can also respond to how we are engaging maybe national NGOs in our initiative with Philippines for the Regional Flyway Initiative, which we are developing a project with the Global Environment Facility.
Yes, so specifically for the Philippines, we have our several CSOs involved in our consultation. Last year, we had our first Ecosystem Services Assessment Workshop here at ADB HQ, and we've got Haribon was there, and we've got other more local NGOs like the Society for the Conservation of Philippine Wetlands, Wetlands International Philippines also. So we do appreciate their contribution in terms of knowledge and expertise locally. And especially we're developing our concepts for our wetland sites, the priority sites. So this is really very important to us. So we make sure that we have them involved and consulted. Thanks. We also have one more question if we have or a comment, or do we?
Okay, well, let's take the last one and
yeah.
then close.
So this is from Chingay Jaime. Thank you for the excellent session. BirdLife International is one of the most active nature-related CSOs in ADB. What do you think makes the partnership successful, and how might it be improved?
Go ahead, Martin.
So I think in terms of its success, it's partly because there are just an enormous number of passionate, brilliant, committed people who are all united around the love of birds and wider nature. And passion takes you a long way, but there's also immense expertise. I mean, that's, you know, that's one thing. I think the other thing is that we invest a lot of effort in trying to connect our partners, to try and make sure that they're learning from each other, to support them when they're in need. So, for example, our director for Asia here, Vina, we have a partnership meeting coming up in Indonesia in October. All of our partners will come together. We'll be able to celebrate what we're achieving together and individually, but also share with each other some of the challenges and obstacles that we face. So that community that we create provides solidarity and learning, and we inspire, you know, we can help each other. And I think from our point of view, as I said, the 250 people spread out in 11 offices around the world, you know, we are trying to make sure that we are responsive to their needs, and we can also exploit the opportunities with them when they arise. So, you know, I think the thing to remember about our BirdLife partnership is they range from really big organizations like the one I used to work for, the Royal Society for Protection of the Birds, with 1.2 million members, National Audubon Society in the US, through to, you know, smaller organizations, some of which might only have 5 to 10 staff. But each of them are trying to do the same thing. They're trying to save the nature that they love in their country, and then collaborate to try and save nature around the world. And that ambition is the one we all share. And our job is to try and help them be successful.
Great. One of the question I think was how we can improve our partnership. So maybe you can.
The BirdLife, I apologize if I missed that one. So how can we improve? So obviously we are talking in, you know, really favorable terms. We feel really proud about where we've got to at this point. It's been a lot of effort to get us to this point, and many of the people involved in that are in this room at the moment. And I think the thing we've got to try and move from is we're in this sort of development phase. And then the thing we've got to really focus on is then on the implementation phase. And I think to retain the energy, excitement that we've obviously had over the early years of developing the RFI, and then follow it through. And I guess there's going to be some tricky moments in this period. And so being able to be, you know, open and honest with each other. We both have our own needs. And I think just being able to keep that trusting partnership where we can, you know, perhaps constructively challenge each other to say, you know, I hope this won't happen. But if, for example, you took your eyes off the RFI in about a year's time or whatever, which I hope won't happen, we can then say to you, come on, this is a commitment. You know, there's more work to be done. And there's also wider opportunities. So I think that, you know, if we can, a spirit of a trusted partnership, as any of you who might be married in this room will know, is about honest dialogue. It's about giving feedback, and so that partnership can become stronger. And I think that's probably what we just keep on need to do.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think you nailed it in the sense that this is a long-term relationship, and we are building up from development to implementation. And I think that we are ready to embark further on biodiversity conservation and also landscape conservation and others. We have a commitment under the MDB's nature commitment with all the other MDBs, as well as the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework is there for implementation, and we're here to support our developing member countries on their endeavor to protect nature and protect their natural resources. And thank you so much, panel, today for this really rich conversation. And, you know, not only on the project implementation, but it really highlighted our accountability system, the safeguard system, and then how we can really move on to more investments moving forward. So with this, for the formal closing, I would like to invite Duncan Lang, who is behind all this and who's been leading all the Regional Flyway Initiative and beyond. So over to you, Duncan.
Thank you very much. That was a really great panel discussion, so thank you for that. Just to say, there are some knowledge products at the back and also tea and coffee, so do stick around and catch up and have some more informal discussions. So yeah, thanks for the intro, Yoko. It's a huge honor for me to close this session. And And so thanks to Martin for that wonderful presentation. Thanks to Vino for coming over as well. Thanks to Heidi and the NGOC, our partner for this event, for setting the scene today. And thanks to our wonderful panel for bringing the conversation to life. So I've been working very closely with BirdLife for the last 7 years, but actually my relationship with BirdLife goes back to probably about 2012. And at that time, I was living in Malaysia, and I was trying to do the first red list, national red list for the birds of Malaysia. And I was kind of struggling, and I'd organized to go to Cambridge to meet Mike Crosby and Stuart Butchart, who are, you know, leading experts in this field. And I was welcomed in, had a wonderful time. We managed to publish a paper out of it. And I went away from BirdLife with a massive load of swag because they gave me all these free books, which was awesome. But I also got a real sense of, you know, the support and the warmth. I was a relatively young guy, consultant working for a consulting firm, but the open, warm way they treated me, and also the technical expertise they provided in helping me to try and do that was brilliant. So I can only say since those, whatever, 13 years ago, my relationship has only grown since then. So it's great to be here today to keep going with that. So for the last 7 years, we've done a lot together, and we've talked about the RFI and AviStep. I think the fact that we have a shared vision in terms of taking flyway level approach to protection and sustainable management of the biodiversity in the region has been brilliant. And also our kind of shared vision about renewable energy, scaling that up, but sensitively to biodiversity. I think it can serve as a model for how we can interact with civil society organizations. And I can perhaps give you kind of 3 areas from your 5, I think it was, and also building on the NGOC's approach for civil society engagement as set out by Heidi. So firstly, the one thing that I've really enjoyed with working with BirdLife is the fact that what they do is grounded in science. You know, that is the bedrock by which all of the work that we've done on both the RFI and AviStep has been built on. We have been, out of both of those projects, we plan to, or we have already published papers in peer-reviewed journals. And this is really a bit of a different thing for ADB. We don't normally do this. And I think that gives us legitimacy with other civil society organizations. It also means that our work is peer reviewed and it's under scientific rigor. And thirdly, in terms of replication, the fact that you publicly disclosing information in a scientific journal means that other people can use that information too. So I think it's really fundamental part of what we're doing with BirdLife. Secondly is partnership. As Martin mentioned, the BirdLife model is around having local partners. And, you know, I can, you know, highlight, obviously, Harper is here in the room, which is lovely to see you. Another organization we've had some really fantastic interaction with in terms of the AviStep has been the Bombay Natural History Society. Really important people, but also they bring that local legitimacy of the work in that country. They bring extremely high technical expertise. They also bring a lot of local data and local know-how about birds and where they are. And so it's really important that, and I think in terms of the way we interact with civil society, bringing in that local element is really critical for us. And I really appreciate that as one of the things that stands out with me in our relationship. And thirdly is independence. So as a civil society organization, I think it is critical that BirdLife still can play a role in advocating with ADB for change. This, in fact, pushes us and makes us better. And as I have already been leading the biodiversity component as well for the new environmental and social framework, I've had a few interactions with the team about pushing us on our policy. They've given us extensive comments, which are very well received. And, you know, we try and do as many of the suggestions if we think that they would fit with our, our board and also with our developing member countries. So I don't think in our safeguard policy we'll have a direct provision on nature positive, But, you know, we think that that will go into our strategy, which it already is, and also in the ambition statement, you know, as Bruce set out to you earlier today, Martin. But I think, as Babette nicely pointed out, the role of civil society is key. And I've lived through 2 compliance cases, so I really know about it firsthand. But I would always welcome feedback from civil society, good or bad. And, you know, I would really say that they do make our projects better. And the one that I had a long relationship with Babette on in Georgia, the project is far better as a result of that engagement with the accountability mechanism and civil society. So maybe I can just finish now, because I'm holding up everybody from the tea and coffee, by just perhaps re-emphasizing, you know, one of Yoko's opening points, that we are really facing the triple planetary crisis on climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And it is therefore vital that we work closer together with civil society and leverage on their expertise and connections to address these crises. It is also vital that civil society engage with us, MDBs, directly. We have no time for ivory tower comments, and we see firsthand today with Karina that, you know, we really need to scale up our you know, activities. So it's really great that we have BirdLife here to showcase a different type of relationship with civil society, and one I hope we can replicate with others moving forward. So thank you, everybody, and back to you, Yoko, for closing. Okay, so I think it's more efficient if I just say thank you very much, everybody coming. And we close now the session now, and please come and join us for some informal conversation and coffee. Thank you very much. And thanks to the organizers, and thanks to everybody here. I think I wrote some thank yous, but yes, so thank you, NGOC. Thank you, all our lovely panelists. Thank you, Yoko, for wonderful moderation. Thanks to the amazing team behind the scenes for putting this all together. A lot of hard work. Thanks for IT. We got there in the end. And thanks to Sylvia as well online. And thanks to Heidi for her opening remarks. And thanks to BirdLife. Thank you.
You've been really, really helpful. That was great example.